Faccio Ryad con la mascherina, sì.
Allora, io mi scuso un attimo, vado a controllare i dettagli. Ci vediamo tra poco.
Questo è un po' ecclesiale, quell'altro sarebbe un po' più...
Come vuole, lei ci ho messo il massimo un po'. Come vuole.
Monsignor Arbach.
Ecco,
Benvenuto, benvenido.
Bienvenido.
Ecco,
¿Cómo estás?
¿Todo bien? ¿Y usted?
Gracias.
magari, sì.
Buenos días, Su Eminencia.
Buenos días, de lejos, de lejos. Venga por acá, venga por acá.
Algo minutos y empezamos.
Vedi la sala, una sala grande di Caritas.
Sì, faccio questo e questo è più...
Magari sì. Ecco Ryad, è mascherato.
Good morning. Buongiorno.
Bonjour.
Yes.
We still wait for your bank thing, eh?
Corona is terrible. Corona during this day.
In Damascus now the hospitals are full of people with corona. Eh?
We arrived at a peak area of Corona.
Yes.
Very
Good for you because you have antibodies now. You don't worry.
Yes. Yes.
Ecco. Allora non la bandiera, va bene. No, sembra che la bandiera vaticana sarebbe assurdo.
Della Caritas, però.
Good morning, Your Eminence.
Good morning, good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good morning, Ryad.
Good morning.
And bonjour, Monseigneur Arbach. Comment allez-vous? Je suis content de vous voir.
It doesn't speak French.
بدي فكرة عن حتى الترجمة لي ولا الترجمة وعم يحكوا لحتى أعرف مالي معروف مجبور لينا اليوم عم نعدي اللي انضموا كثير شايف هي أنجيلا من كاريتاس ألمانيا.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Caritas Internationalis press conference. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. We wanted to organize these press conferences in these days during which we marked 10 years of suffering of the Syrian people, to shed light on a protracted crisis, which is also nowadays a forgotten crisis due to the effect of COVID-19 in monopolizing information. Today, we would like to show our sympathy and solidarity to the Syrian people, and also send some important messages in the view to the 5th donor conference, which will be held next week in Brussels. Today, we had the pleasure to have with us His Eminence Cardinal Mario Zenari, apostolic nuncio to Syria, His Excellency Archbishop Jean-Abdo Arbach, Melkite Archbishop of Homs and also President of Caritas Syria, Ryad Sargi, Director of Caritas Syria, and Aloysius John, Secretary General of Caritas Internationalis. Before giving the floor to the speakers, I'll inform you that you can send some questions in the chat box, and at the end of all the speeches, we will try, if we will be on time, to give floor also to your questions. 10 years ago, Syrian citizens were afraid about what might happen in their country. And unfortunately, after a decade, we saw that not only that nightmare became true, but the situation is beyond what we could imagine 10 years ago. In this scenario, the local church, of which Caritas is an expression, has never abandoned the local population. We remember courageous priests and sisters and missionaries that stood by Syrians of all faiths, even in the most difficult context and even at the risk of their life. And to represent that church who stayed along with its flock, we have the pleasure to have today Cardinal Zenari, Apostolic Nuncio to Syria, who has remained in the beloved and war-torn Syria, as Pope Francis repeatedly called it, during all this tragic conflict. His Eminence, the floor is yours.
For convening this video conference just in this crucial moment for Syria, when after 10 years of a bloody conflict, the peace process, unfortunately, is in a deadlock. The reconstruction and the economic recovery haven't yet started, and many people are losing hope in the future of their country. It is true that bombs and rockets have not fallen on various regions of Syria for some months. However, the terrible bomb of poverty has exploded, which, according to the latest figures of the United Nations, inexorably affects about 90% of the population that are living below the poverty line, the highest percentage in the world. The Syrian pound has lost much of its value against the US dollar. The price of food has significantly increased. At the bakeries, people queue to try to get limited subsidized bread that is available. The same scene for petrol all around the country. This is the sad result of 10 years of war, corruption, and sanctions, especially some of them. The Lebanese crisis and the international COVID-19 pandemic had also a significant negative impact. The people call this difficult time as economic war, worse than of that of the previous years. And apart from the attention given to Syria on this occasion of this sad anniversary, the country has almost completely disappeared from the radars of the media, just as Pope Francis warned about a year ago. This gratitude deserves the international community, especially the various offices of the United Nations active in the humanitarian field and the Security Council for opening the possibility for numerous trucks to transport aid across the Turkish border every day for approximately 11 million of Syrians in need of humanitarian assistance. Sincere gratitude goes also to the significant support ensured by countries and institutions present at the various Brussels conferences. In this regard, we hope for the generous outcome of the coming Brussels Fifth Conference. Sincere appreciation deserves also the considerable support given by some governments for various humanitarian projects, ranging from food emergency relief to support in education, healthcare, and other fields. The work of numerous NGOs and humanitarian organizations, both in Syria and outside Syria, is also very commendable. And we should never forget the hundreds of people, some of them volunteers, who lost their lives helping Syrians. A particular gratitude deserves the local churches for their endeavor into humanitarian assistance, in particular Caritas Syria, whose task, as I stressed from the beginning of the conflict, should be that of the backbone of the humanitarian mission of the Catholic Church. Thanks to the competent assistance of Caritas Internationalis, finally, Caritas Syria succeeded in overcoming recently some difficult problems. Our sincere thanks goes to all the Caritas partners and to the numerous and generous Christian humanitarian institutions. The challenges, let me underline, are enormous, and the possibilities are very limited. Let me stress once again the necessity of a minimum of coordination among the Christian institutions, according also to the motu proprio Intima Ecclesia Natura and Deus Caritas Est of Pope Benedict XVI. I am particularly moved to see such generous solidarity, but let me say at the same time that I am also very restless. In the end, if we consider carefully, all these generous contributions are a tap, faucet, rubinetto of water in the desert. Very, very precious drops, but always a tap, a rubinetto that risks giving less and less water over time. Also, the major emergency projects of the international community mentioned earlier cannot continue forever. Much of this aid, at this moment still urgent and necessary, is not an adequate long-term solution. Pope Francis said, I quote, "It is imperative to devise suitable and far-sighted solutions capable of enabling the beloved Syrian people exhausted by war to regain peace and to begin the reconstruction of the country. Syria needs, according to the experts, hundreds of billions of US dollars to build hospitals, schools, houses, and factories, and restart the economy. Development is the new name for peace," wrote Pope St. Paul VI in the encyclical letter Populorum Progressio, and Pope Francis in his encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti speaks of the necessity of finding a way to ensure the fundamental right of peoples to subsistence and progress. And in another passage of the same document, he writes, A real and lasting peace will only be possible on the basis of global ethic, solidarity and cooperation. Peace, I repeat, will not come to Syria without reconstruction and without economic recovery. But how long will Syrians have to wait? Time is running out. Many of the people have lost hope. Urgent and radical solutions are needed. As an Italian saying goes, the bull must be taken by horns and not by tail. How can we unlock and open these huge pipelines, or better, a river of aid now before it's too late? What obstacle is preventing the turning of the key that will open these pipelines? First of all, or at the same time, the present political deadlock between the parties in the conflict must be overcome with the help of, I quote, a constructive international diplomacy on Syria, end of quote, as rightly points out the Special Envoy of the United Nations for Syria, Geir Pedersen. Allow me to quote some of his wording on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the starting of the conflict. I quote, "At the same time, must be overcome the you first syndrome, he said, that has dominated much of the diplomacy around Syria for the last decade. Demands are on all sides, but little movement, let me say, no movement, little movement on any side. This dynamic has to change. What is needed is mutual and reciprocal step by step from Syrian government and opposition and the key international players." End of quotation. In conclusion, while the peace process is in this moment in a complete deadlock, the poverty, on the contrary, is moving forward fast. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence, for your very significant speech and to describe the situation of a population, as you well said, and now also under the bomb of poverty. And I particularly appreciated the expression you used to describe the work of Caritas Syria as a backbone of the action of the local churches. And as you well said, during this year, also humanitarian people, also Caritas Syria staff experienced the same situation than the rest of the population. Last week on our website, we published the story of Aloysius, a member of Caritas Syria staff, who told Caritas Internationalis that as the rest of as many other Syrians, he was displaced. Other colleagues experienced also the loss of their beloved ones, even kidnappings. But despite that, they continue to strive and to help the population. So to tell you about the work of Caritas Syria, I now pass the floor to first Monsignor Arbach, who is the president of Caritas Syria, and then Ryad Sargi. Your Excellency, please. Your Excellency will speak in Arabic and Ryad will translate.
صباح الخير جميعا.
Good morning, everyone.
نونسيو أوليسيو الكاردينال زيناري وكل المشتركين معنا بكاريتاس.
Cardinal Zenari and all participants in Caritas Internationalis.
أؤيد ما قاله السفير البابوي.
I agree with His Eminence and what he said.
بالوضع في سوريا بعد 10 سنوات.
About the situation in Syria after 10 years.
صعب جدا.
It's very difficult.
أول شيء الحرب الاقتصادية ضد شعبنا كله سوا مسلمين ومسيحيين.
First of all, the economic war on Syrians, Muslims and Christians as well.
ألمس بعيني وبيدي الصعوبات التي يعانيها شعبنا وخاصة في القرى الداخلية بسوريا.
I see with my eyes and touch with my hands sufferings of all Syrians in Syria, in the villages and cities, inside and outside Syria also.
وكما قال سعادة السفير إنه الفقر أصبح 90%. نعم أصبح 90% فعليا.
And as His Excellency said, poverty became more than 30%.
العقوبات يلي موجودة على سوريا ضد الشعب وقانون قيصر أثر فعليا خلال السنتين بشكل علني وواضح.
Economic sanctions and Caesar Act on Syria affected the people, and it's very clear.
وباء كورونا كثير من الناس تأثروا بكورونا.
Many people affected also by the COVID-19 pandemic.
ويخافون أن يذهبوا إلى المستشفيات لأنه ما في أدوية.
And they are afraid of going to hospitals because there are no medicine.
وأصبح عامل الخوف والقلق موجود بين الشعب السوري.
And fear is always there among the Syrians.
الهجرة بسوريا صارت واضحة.
Displacement and immigration became wider and increased.
والسؤال اللي عم نطرح اليوم من الواقع شعبنا شو بدنا نعمل؟ شو المستقبل تبعنا؟ ونوي الأمل.
And the question is now, what should we do? And what is our hope? And what can we do?
لا عمل.
No work.
لا مصانع عم تمشي.
No factories.
لا المعامل. ولا إعادة أعمار بيوت.
And no reconstruction of houses.
ما عادش في كرامة للإنسان كإنسان.
No dignity as a human being.
نعم عم نشوف بأم العين طوابير من الصفوف لشراء ربطة خبز.
We daily see crowds of people waiting to buy bread.
البنزين.
Fuel also.
كهرباء ما في.
No electricity.
عم تجينا ساعتين أو 3 ساعات بالنهار.
Just 2 or 3 hours a day.
ثروتنا عم تنسرق.
Our resources are being stolen.
القمح السوري حرق تقريبا.
Wheat is burnt.
الآثار السورية انسرقت.
Syrian antiquities are also stolen.
نعيش في فقر مذهل.
We live in a poverty line that is unimaginable.
ونفكر كلنا سوا عم نفكر إنه هل يا ترى في إبادة للشعب السوري؟
And we are all thinking, is there a genocide for Syrians?
الشيء الثاني اللي بحب أقوله.
Second point.
الوضع المعيشي والأمني وغياب حلول واضحة.
the living situation and security.
without any solution.
There is no solution.
وكثير من أهلنا يفكرون بالهجرة إلى الخارج.
And most of our families think to immigrate.
ومعظم شبابنا هرب إلى لبنان وبلدان الجوار.
Most of the youth escaped.
خوفا من التجنيد الإجباري.
Afraid of military service.
أنا أوافق مع السفير البابوي.
I agree with His Excellency.
نريد السلام.
We want peace.
نريد الحوار.
We want dialogue.
نريد التعاون معارضة والحكومة مع بعض البعض لإعادة كرامة الإنسان.
We ask to cooperate the government with the opposition to regain the human dignity.
ويكون في اتفاق دولي لأنه بعد 10 سنين من الحرب.
After 10 years of war, we ask for international cooperation.
وبسبب الأزمات في منطقة الشرق الأوسط أصبحت سوريا منسية.
And because of the crisis in the Middle East, Syria became forgotten.
كما أن الأزمة اللبنانية
The Lebanese crisis also
أثرت كمان على الأزمة بسوريا.
affected on the crisis in Syria.
بسبب تسكير البنوك.
Because of lockdown and the banks also.
وعدم سحب الأموال السوريين من لبنان.
Because of the difficulty of withdrawing the money from the banks. Syrian money.
Caritas Syria بفضل السفير البابوي بفضل القيمين على Caritas Syria من إدارة ومتطوعين.
Caritas Syria, thanks to His Excellency and to the responsible team of Caritas Syria,
تعمل بجهد كبير.
They try their best.
ولكن في نقص كبير وفي حاجات كثيرة نلمسها للشعب السوري.
But there is much need and lack of many things.
هلا بالنسبة للمشاريع رياض عنده أكثر بهالموضوع.
Concerning the projects, Mr. Ryad has more to say.
أشكر الجميع.
Thank you very much for
على هاللقاء اللي بده يكون بين بعضنا البعض وبيكون في وضوح.
And clearness.
وفي سبب أن انهيار الليرة السورية كمان أثر كثير علينا.
And the decrease of the Syrian pound also affected us.
يعني معاش الموظف اليوم يساوي $10.
The salary of Syrian is $10.
كيف بده يقدر يعيش؟
How could he live?
أشكركم جميعا.
Thank you for all.
وأتمنى لكل الشركاء
I wish all partners
التفهم
understanding
والوعي وإدراك ما نحن نعانيه من أزمات صعبة في وطننا الحبيب.
understand what we are suffering in our beloved country.
وشكرا.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, to your intervention and to have also echoed the voice of the Syrian people and stressing their asks to the international communities. Now I'll give the floor to Ryad Sargi, Director of Caritas Syria, to describe in depth what is the response of Caritas Syria in front of the huge need of the local population.
Thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Your Eminence, our nuncio, Cardinal Zenari. Good morning to Aloysius and to all our partners in Caritas Internationalis. Let me first of all thank you for hosting me this morning, and many thanks for your efforts to support Caritas Syria's activities in helping the most vulnerable of Syrian brothers in our beloved country, Syria. Caritas Syria is a part of Caritas Internationalis, International Confederation, and it has been operating in Syria under the umbrella of the Catholic churches in Syria for more than 50 years and activated its work with the Iraqi crisis in 2003 and displacement of Iraqis to Syria. And its work increased and expanded with the onset of the Syrian crisis in March 2011. Caritas Syria is spread over most of the Syrian lands, which are under state control. It has offices in Damascus, Damascus countryside, Homs, Tartus, Latakia, Aleppo, Al-Hasake, and Al-Kamishli. 250 employees and 78 volunteers. Caritas Syria founders are Caritas International Network and has no dealing yet with UN agencies, hopefully soon, or any other organization. We are seeking to cooperate with the new donors because our activities is much more now and the needs in Syria really huge. Caritas Syria helps nearly 200,000 beneficiaries every year through multiple and varied activities from food baskets to hygiene baskets, education programs, paying school tuition, distributing stationery and bags to students, renovating schools and houses, as well providing psychosocial support for children, establishing child-friendly space centers and children's garden project is to be held soon in Aleppo. Distributing of drinking tanks and drinking water and hygiene kits, especially lately in Al-Hasake Governorate, due to cutting off water on the people at the Al-Hasake region, as well as medical projects to help patients, including medicines, X-rays, blood analysis, patient screening, surgeries, outpatients and inpatients, assistance to cancer patients, clothing awareness sessions, literacy for adults, projects to help the elderly, and so on, and a lot of other activities. Last year, livelihood projects and distribution of multi-purpose cash to beneficiaries has been started. Syrians have paid all cost of the war in Syria during the past 10 years in terms of killing, internally displacement and refugees and destruction. The destruction did not distinguish between houses, public facilities, or medical or educational centers. There are some figures according to the United States statistic. Let's say number of dead is around 388,000 and many times that of the wanted. 5.6 million people left Syria. 1/3 of these are children under 11 years old. Most of them are in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and also in the European countries. 6.7 million left their villages and cities, moving to safer areas in Syria. 2.4 million Syrian children are outside the educational system. 12.4 million people don't have access to food and heating. 60% of children are in urgent need for education, food, and heating. 13.4 million people need humanitarian assistance. Syrian pound has become 100 times more since the beginning of the crisis. 100 times more. The average monthly salary of employees in the public sector is equivalent to $15 according to black market exchange rate. And in the private sector is about $50. The cost of 1 month's food basket for a family of 5 is $136. A family of 5 persons needs to spend an amount equivalent to $350 per month as basic expenses. Good quality bread has increased 60 times since the start of the crisis. Let's say, for example, the price of 1 egg is currently 300 Syrian pounds, while before the crisis it was 3 Syrian pounds. Infrastructure loses. 70% of electricity stations destroyed. 35% of schools have been destroyed. 70% of healthcare workers left Syria. 50% of the health infrastructure has been destroyed. Syrian people used to live in a state of luxury and a good economic life 10 years ago. And now 85 to 90, as the Cardinal said, of the Syrians are below the poverty line, standing at the doors of the charitable organizations and associations asking for help each day. The sanctions and boycott on Syria, in addition to the Caesar Act, has negatively affected the lives of the Syrian citizens, especially the most vulnerable, as this sanction hit them at the core of their daily lives, so that some of them could only eat bread and drink only water. The garbage containers in the streets become a source of food for the poorest. Unfortunately, all kinds of meat, fruits, and even vegetables have become a dream for the majority of our brothers in the homeland, as well as great suffering due to the lack of means of heating resulting from the shortage of heating fuel, electricity, and gas, and their high prices if they are available. Syrian citizens spend many hours of their time in queue for bread, sugar, and rice, as well as in front of the petrol stations. According to the Syrian Ministry of Health, the numbers of coronavirus infection were 2 days ago 17,411, recovery 11,599, and 1,163 deaths until March 21st of this year. Recently, the number of the infected patients reached a peak to around 171 patients per day. Hospitals in Syria are full of corona patients, as well the intensive care, all full. Currently, new patients are being asked to stay at home. In fact, the numbers of real infected patients are many times higher than the announced number. Life in Syria is very normal and there are no internal precautions or measurements, such as closing, lockdown, curfew, and all of this, everything is normal due to the economic situation pressing on Syrian citizens and they cannot stop working. Therefore, at the end, finally, we urgently call on the international community, especially the European countries, to lift the unjust sanctions and boycott on the Syrian people who are not guilty of facing these unfair sanctions in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ryad. What emerged dramatically in this overview with really clear figures made by Ryad is that the children are the first victim of this war, not only in the humanitarian field, not only because they are hungry, they suffer malnutrition, but also for the lack of education. We have in Syria, there are many schools destroyed by the war, other schools used by the shelter for the displaced people. And it is thinking of these children that Caritas Internationalis during this month of March launched an appeal in order to help Syrian children, not only with the food and health, but also through education program, which are very well promoted by Caritas Syria. And if you will like, you will find in the folder some information about our appeal, our campaign, but you can also go on our website, www.caritas.org, to have more information. During these 10 years of war, Caritas Syria and Caritas Confederations helped a lot Syrian population, but at the same time, the whole confederation, Caritas Internationalis, always strive to give the voice to Syrian people at the different level, and especially at the international level. We called many times for the relief of sanctions. And today we want to reiterate our appeal and our request to the international community, especially in the view of the 5th donor conference in Brussels. And for this, I give now the floor to Caritas Internationalis Secretary General Aloysius John. Please.
Your Eminence Cardinal Zenari, Your Excellency Monsignor Arbach, dear Ryad, Secretary General of Caritas Syria, and dear friends of Caritas Syria. This is an important moment, and I was listening very closely to what Cardinal Zenari was pleading. March 15th has marked the 10th anniversary of the Syrian crisis. We have helplessly witnessed hundreds of thousands being killed in daylight due to the war, and millions of people displaced and living in inhuman condition. Despite ongoing peace initiatives for which we recognize them and agreements to cease hostilities, there is little hope of peace, and the humanitarian situation in Syria and in the regions remains extremely critical and is a matter of serious concern. It is further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the deterioration of the economic situation across the regions. In his recent encyclical letter, Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis noted that the first victims of every war is the human family's innate vocation to fraternity. Since the beginning of the crisis, over 12 million people have been displaced, 12 million people. More than 6 million remained inside Syria and are living tribulations on a day-to-day basis without a next day, without a future, while over 5 million are generously hosted by neighboring countries and living also in desperate situation, especially in Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey, completely away from their homes. and over 1 million more have found refuge in other countries. Caritas Confederation has served more than 1 million Syrians. Over 200,000 have been helped by Caritas Syria in a very desperate situation and with lots of difficulties. And Caritas Syria is in the front line at the moment of COVID-19, which adds to the tribulation of the Syrians, increasing the psychological pressure and mental distress. For how long will this continue? For how long can we let this happen? Where is our responsibility is the question which comes to each and everyone's mind. Pope Francis' encyclical letter calling each and everyone to love through the culture of fraternity is a glimmer of hope and a source of inspiration for the international community, especially for all the actors involved, and in a very particular way to the Syrians themselves, who are the innocent victims of this war. The occasion of the forthcoming Brussels 5th Syria Conference on the 29th and 30th of March, convened to renew the international community's support and solidarity to Syria and the region, should be seized to send a strong message of hope and brotherhood to the Syrian people. The Syrians and especially the Syrian youngest generation cannot afford any more the trials and violence of this war. They deserve the best. Can we deceive them? At this moment of remembering the sufferings of the Syrians, and at the moment when the donors are meeting in Brussels, Caritas Internationalis joins the voice of the Church in Syria and calls on the international community and the European Union to immediately remove all unilateral sanctions, which only aggravates the humanitarian condition of the Syrians and bringing them to inhuman living conditions. Secondly, accessing basic needs and services should be a priority. Essential health supplies, including COVID-19 vaccines and treatments for the Syrians, both inside Syria and living in the camps, must be a priority. It should be made a priority and necessary action should be taken. Thirdly, assuring support to the NGO, in particular the faith-based organizations in Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, which are in the front line to support the refugees, must be a priority. They need means to bring the necessary humanitarian aid, and priority help must be given to them to fulfill this mission. There is also a need to support the NGOs working in Syria, in particular the faith-based organizations, to enable them to continue the mission in good working conditions in order to help the people to live in dignity. In line with the message of the Holy Father, military action will only build hatred and will not bring an end to this protracted crisis. A negotiated peace solution is the only way. Caritas believes that peace must be given a chance to avoid continued stalemate, which only results in untold sufferings to the innocent civilians. We call for an urgent diplomatic action to get the process going again. Bring all the parties to the negotiation table. Thank you very much, and we hope against hope that this will happen.
Thank you to Aloysius John, Caritas Internationalis Secretary General, and the Pope Francis' words and support was very, very important for the Syrian population during this tragic 10 years. And the first questions we received, and I invite you to, if you have any other question, to please send it through the chat box. I have a question related to the Pope's trip to Iraq for Cardinal Zenari. His Eminence Darius Manos Torres is asking how the Syrian people perceived this trip, Pope Francis in Iraq, and if there are hopes that in the future, hopefully not a near future, it can be a trip to Syria as well.
I must say that the Pope's visit in Iraq was very encouraging for all the people of Syria and beyond the people of Syria. Many Christians, they follow through some TV, especially from Lebanese TV, and some also went they crossed the border. To my knowledge, at least 2 bishops, Syrian bishops, they were in Iraq, some priests and some young people. It was very, very encouraging. And beyond the Christian population of Syria, you see, it spread all over the sectors of the Syrian population. And in the following days, I must say, since I became some months ago the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, I received some visits of some diplomats from all around the world, also from non-Christians diplomats. And they praise a lot this visit to Iraq. And some of them, they asked, when is the Pope coming also to Syria? I must assure you that Syria is far, far from being forgotten from Pope Francis. Syria remains in his heart, and I can interpret him saying that as soon as the circumstances allow, certainly the Pope will visit Syria. And I must add that one of the most successful visits of a Pope to Syria was that of Pope St. Paul John II in 2001. A great visit. And if I am not wrong, was the first visit of a Pope in a mosque, the Umayyad Mosque, because in this mosque, which was before a church, there is the reliquia of Saint John the Baptist. So Pope John Paul II visited this great Umayyadi mosque, and remained in prayer before the shrine of Saint John the Second. And many times I visited this mosque, and I prayed before the shrine of the Saint John the Baptist. I saw every kind of people also praying before this shrine of Saint John, of John the Baptist.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence. So there are any other questions?
Is it possible that Monsignor Arbach wants to say something also?
Yes, of course. Please, Your Excellency.
زيارة البابا إلى العراق
Pope's visit, His Holiness Pope's visit to Iraq
كما قال السفير البابا كانت مهمة جدا
was very important, as His Excellency mentioned.
كثير من الناس المسلمين
And many Muslims
عبروا لنا
appreciated
عن التواضع
the humbleness of
وعن
His Holiness
المحبة يلي ظهرت من البابا
and his
للشعب
love towards the Iraqis
للشعب لكل الشعوب لكل
and all the peoples.
كانت مهمة جدا وكانت فعلا كانت رسالة سلام ورسالة أمل ورسالة رجاء لكل المنطقة.
And it was a message of peace and message of hope to all regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. So I I have a question. If any of the speaker can share more reflection on the good practice in terms of how international donor support can support the local civil society organization and faith-based organization like Caritas Syria in their work. Maybe from, yes, Ryad, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, in fact, because as you all know, because of coronavirus and so on, let's say the donation or our partner decrease their contribution with the activities of Caritas Syria. Therefore, especially also what happened in Beirut, the big bomb in Beirut last August also affected us so much. So, the exchange rate between US dollar and Syrian pound, this terrible what happened starting from beginning of this year till today, it's around 3 times more. This is terrible for us and for the people, whereas the salary stayed the same. Therefore, the Syria people needs help and support. And I don't know if can Caritas Internationalis or our partners in Caritas network can support Syria more, especially in different areas, especially in medical area and others, because we have from the nuncio, they gave us in Syria an open hospital, very, very important project. But we need more also for in medical sector and other sectors in Syria, because really the needs of the Syrian people is huge during these days. And I don't know if can other partners or other organization, Christian organization can contribute also with the activities of Caritas Syria. Thank you.
I think in response to this question, there are 3 points I would like to highlight. Since the beginning of the crisis, member organizations, Caritas, for example, has been in the front line helping the people with the psychosocial support, food and non-food item, and also giving the basic needs in terms of medicines, etc. If they have not done this, the question for me is, what could have happened to the people? So there is already a good practice there. In spite of the difficulties, in spite of the danger, people, the Caritas organizations were braving the different difficult situations to bring help to the people. The second good example, best practice is Caritas Jordan has undertaken a very, I would say, novel action at the time of COVID-19. When COVID-19 happened to stop the outbreak, and they started bringing awareness to the people, and they had a wonderful program in order to conjugate humanitarian aid and awareness building so that people are protected. Now, the challenge we have here is how to ensure that the work of the NGOs, especially Caritas, for example, for us, how it can continue. Today, helping Caritas or not, helping the NGOs or not, is not an option. We have to help them because they are the only ones in the front line who are able to really bring support to the people in a very capillary way. And how this can continue is the challenge. And I hope that this will be taken up at the 5th conference in Brussels, donor conference in Brussels next week. I think the NGOs, Caritas, faith-based organizations have proved that creative solidarity can contribute to help maintain the dignity of the human person. I think that needs to continue. It has to continue. So this will be my response to the question which was raised by one of the participants.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And since it seems that there are no more questions, I would like just to thank all the speakers. First of all, His Eminence Cardinal Zenari, and then His Excellency Monsignor Arbach, Ryad Sargi, and our Secretary General Aloysius John. Thanks to all of you for having been with us. In the chat box, you will find a link to a folder containing all the speeches, but if you have any requests, you can send me an email at petrosillo@caritas.va, and have you all a very nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.